The title of his speech is A Journey from a Single Step, and will be 10 to 12 minutes in length. Please welcome Trevor Sebastian.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to our dignitary for today. Today, I'm so excited because I finally completed my very first path on Pathways, and I wanted to take a moment to reflect on not only my time doing the path, but also my time here in Toastmasters and in Knott's Easy Toastmaster Club. So I picked the title of A Journey with a Single Step, but let's start off with this quote. I'm sure you've all heard it a million times before. It's been beaten into the ground, but I'm going to say it again because it's a wonderful quote. Thousands of years it's been used. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And that's very true because I started a journey that has been many steps now, and I will continue on my journey. And one step began with me joining Toastmasters. And you might be asking to yourself, well, why in the world did you join Toastmasters? And I think we've all had this question before. We're here for a reason, and that reason, there's many of them. And so I want to explain why in the world I joined Toastmasters and why in the world I joined this club. So you can see here on the left, for a long time in my profession, I was something called a behavior technician, which is where I worked with children who had autism in their home, and I taught them some really basic skills, things like communication, things like self-help skills, how to wash their hands, etc. And for a long time, this was a great job. I was, right in the field, front lines, working with these kids, and it was wonderful. But at one point, my company said, "Hey, Trevor, you're doing so good at this. Maybe you should be a supervisor." And that's what happened. I got promoted. And now instead of me just doing what I've learned, I now all of a sudden had to teach other people how to do what I was doing. And for the most part, I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience for me to be able to kind of express myself and do what I was doing before, but share it with all of my new staff. But the hardest thing that I came across, the thing that gave me anxiety more than anything else, were the parents. Suddenly now I had not only kids to deal with who were having tantrums, I now had parents who were doing the same exact thing. Many of them were great, but some of them just were not happy with what was going on. And when they started getting frustrated with me, I just froze up. What do I do? How do I better myself as a clinician and as a supervisor and deal with parents? Well, I thought, why not Toastmasters? And I might be a little bit of a different person here when it comes to why I joined Toastmasters. You see, for most of my life growing up, I actually really love public speaking. To me, public speaking was a way to plan what you're going to say, to write it down, to practice it over and over again so that when you present it, it's the best possible speech that you can give, the best possible way to express how you're feeling, your information, etc. But for me, actually, public speaking was easy. I wasn't scared of that at all. What I was scared of was just normal social interaction, just talking to people, making small talk. Talking in large groups was absolutely terrifying for me. Like, how do I interact with everybody at the same time? How do I come up with things on the spot? So I thought Toastmasters could be a little bit of both, a way for me to express myself and my love for public speaking, as well as a way to meet new people, to try to develop connections with them and develop friendships and how to talk just naturally to them. And luckily, Toastmasters did that for me. So far, it's been a wonderful experience. And I have also had some experience with Toastmasters because my mom was in Toastmasters for a very long time. And as a kid, I helped her. So I was ready to join this club. Now, this is the exact page that I saw when I was looking for a club. And as many of us know, I was really excited to go to this club, but the downside was this over here. You probably can't see my cursor, but it says meeting times Friday at 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. That was the hardest thing for me. I went, oh man, that's really early. But it was a club that's very close to me. And I was like, hey, let's try it out. If I don't like the club, I could always go to a different club. And that first day, I have to say, I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how these people are going to act. I don't know how they're going to treat me. What if I'm an outsider? Maybe I'm too young. I have no idea. But in fact, probably the nicest, most welcoming group of people I've ever met in my life. And it has shown me that, man, like you can go as a stranger to some place and people can treat you as if you're a part of a family. And that's been amazing and a really great way for me to continue learning and growing as a person. So this club has been absolutely wonderful. Now, I want to go ahead and take a moment now for the rest of my speech to just kind of show you my progress and some videos that we have. I don't have a video of my icebreaker, but I just want to talk about it. Some of you might remember when I did my first speech, I went out with a bang because I talked about when I was a kid in preschool and how I almost burned down my school. So you all have a good idea of who I am and kind of what I want to talk about just for my icebreaker. I wanted to really challenge myself and to come up with fun and interesting topics while I was doing all my speeches. And so I have to thank Dr. Jim for being able to upload all of these videos, because I now will show you a bunch of videos that were on YouTube of my old speeches. And I just want to show you, one, the progression, and two, just some of the fun topics I talked about. And hopefully it gives you inspiration for when you want to do a speech. So this first one was because it was very difficult for me to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, or actually earlier than that. So one of my very first speeches was talking about how to wake up in the morning, and it was titled Morning Miracle. We'll watch just a portion of it.
Much horrible than to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So now every morning, or every night, before I go to bed, I close my eyes and I spend 1 or 2 minutes just to think about some good things I'm going to do the next morning. So set my intention before bed. Step number 2 is to get out of your bed to turn off the alarm clock.
So this was a really fun speech, and it was pretty simple. It was mostly about a book that I read about how to wake up in the morning. And you can already see here that I was apologizing for my mistakes. Was stuttering a little bit. There was a lot of this. This is probably one of my biggest feedback, is that I just kept using my arms over and over again. And so this is one of my very first speeches, and we'll just start seeing the progression. This next one was about kind of my profession and learning about behavior analysis and how do I look at behavior and things like that. Why do people do what they do?
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. Good morning, Trevor. Why do people do what they do? Scientists have been asking this question for decades now, and we still have no idea. Why is it that my boss always yells at me for doing the smallest thing wrong?
Again, very fun speech. You can see I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with my speaking ability. I'm gonna try to move on to my next one. This speech was about having a mentor.
Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett. These are all amazing people. They are incredibly successful, very well known, and unbelievably intelligent. If you had the pleasure of sitting down with them for just 10 minutes, you may ask them, what did you do to become so successful?
Another one where I talked about communication skills.
Have you ever stopped and wondered just how utterly amazing it is how we all communicate to each other? Out of the thousands and thousands of species out there, most of which can't communicate on a very basic level, maybe about food or danger, we are able to communicate about literally endless possibilities.
I think at this point, you can see what my favorite color is just from the shirts that I wear. I was looking through their videos and I'm like, man, I wear like the same 4 shirts over and over again. This one I did. So this one I changed my shirt. One thing I also started to do was I started to try to be a little bit more humorous in my speech, because I feel like a lot of my speeches were very specific. This was a fun speech where I talked about making your own hard apple cider.
You woke up this early morning and asked yourself, how in the world could I make my own hard apple cider? Well, you're in luck, because today I will be teaching you how.
If you ever want to know how to make hard apple cider, it's on YouTube. Very, very good stuff. This is probably one of my favorite speeches. This is about me really expressing one of my kind of more silly hobbies and comparing it to making a lot of money.
In fact, I have the secret to being wealthy. Are you guys ready? I want a drum roll, please. The secret to being wealthy is Pokemon cards.
I really enjoyed that one. And to be fair, Pokemon cards have only increased in price as the pandemic has continued. So get your money out of stocks and put them in Pokemon cards, people. Come on. And so those were a lot of speeches. And for some of you who joined after we went to Zoom, you were able to see what keynotes looked like in our in-person speeches. At one point, we went from in-person speeches now to virtual speeches because of COVID. And it created a lot of new challenges. But as I've mentioned a couple times, it's been amazing how this club has continued to progress despite the fact that we haven't been in person. And so here's a couple of speeches that I did based in on Zoom. And I thought that I tried my best to really incorporate how do I create a good speech while still being virtual. This was about starting a blog.
About creating a website, and let me show my screen really quickly. Is that you get to do this. Type in your name, and this pops out. So this is pretty cool.
And my blog is still up. It has the same 4 articles that have been up there for about 9 months now. So I haven't been too active on it, but feel free, trevorsebastian.com if you want to show it some love. And I'll move forward a little quicker now. This is a speech that I did about reading more books. And as you can see,
Better ourselves.
You couldn't see. I have a lot of books behind me that I've read. And just really quickly, I want to talk about, this is definitely my favorite speech. And I think one of the most impactful speeches that I did. As you can see, it's very long. It was supposed to be a keynote speech. And this was the speech that I took and I made it into my contest speech. And it was titled A Story Told Many Times Before. People really enjoyed it. So that was great that I was able to do this speech. And I had a lot of fun with it. Now, in 2 years of Toastmasters and joining this club, I probably did close to around 20 plus speeches and different topics. And I think that me being able to practice so much of my speaking and just all the different types of topics really helped me grow as a person and become more confident, not only in my speaking abilities, but just in communication in general. And one last thing I want to talk about is the competition. And competition is a great way to challenge yourself, a great way to see how other people speak and act in Toastmasters. And the very first contest that I did was a year ago, and I did a speech titled Big Shoes to Fill. And when I first did the speech, I felt so confident that this was a award-winning speech and it was going to be great. And I was so excited and I presented it to the club, got horrible reception. I did not get to the next level. A lot of the members were saying that it just wasn't, they weren't able to connect with it. They didn't really understand what I was talking about. And I was pretty devastated. But once I reflected a lot more, I realized that this is the point. This is the point of the contest, is to really push yourself and show you that what you might think is a great speech is maybe not the best speech. And so I took that feedback and I really thought about it a lot, and I created a different speech. And I will not show you that speech because I'm sure all of you are tired of seeing it because I've practiced it 100 times now. It was titled Virtual to Reality. And with this speech, I won 3rd place in the district contest, which was absolutely wonderful. And I cannot just even express how much fun it was to be able to compete. And I'm so happy with the result. I'm excited to compete next year as well. Some things that I learned in my 2 years that hopefully might help you with your journey when you take your next steps is, one, to challenge yourself. The point of this club is to push yourself and to do new things. Try not to be stagnant. Try your best to push yourself and challenge yourself. Number 2 is to find your story. When it comes to the speech topic, I try to think of what's the best way to tell my story to everyone else so that it's fun and engaging. So think of the topic you want to talk about and then tell your story. And then tell your story because people love hearing about stories. The last one is tell it with an open heart. I think one of the best things to do in general in life is to be vulnerable with people. When you're vulnerable, people feel comfortable being vulnerable with you. And that to me just opens up the conversation a lot better than having all of these barriers up. So that's what I learned in the 2 years. It's been wonderful. And then to finish this off, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, but it also needs to continue with more steps. So after you take that first step, continue your journey. 1,000 miles seems like a long time, but as you continue to move forward, At some point, you will reach the end. Thank you so much.